Yesterday we were talking about wind farms, and we got a lot of responses from listeners on this. Some people are very concerned about wind farms. Other people are huge supporters of wind farms and very concerned that we would deign to give anybody airtime that questioned them. Well, we thought we'd track down the fellow who had put this research together. His name is Stephen Cooper. The way it was presented yesterday was this is groundbreaking research because it had the full cooperation of a wind farm in southwest Victoria. They actually turned the turbines off completely for extended periods of time, and that level of cooperation was significant and new. And also, his approach was different in that he asked people to write down their sensations. It wasn't, gee, is that noise annoying you? It was,
how's it making you feel?
How's it making you feel?
Now, it's fair to say Mark Parnell, Greens leader, wasn't all that impressed with Stephen Cooper, his previous work or this work, and also was touting the EPA, and we put some questions to him about that. So we'll also talk to the EPA in just a moment. Peter Dolan's Director of Science and Assessment with them. But Stephen Cooper joins us from Canada, I think, acoustic engineer with the Acoustic Group. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
We understand this research, which has been described as groundbreaking, actually had its origins in South Australia with work you did with some of the concerns about wind farms here, correct?
That is correct.
And how so?
When I was down in South Australia doing measurements around the Waterloo wind farm, which was subject of some EPA testing, I attended quite a number of houses. And during the course of monitoring, and I'd been there previously to conduct similar tests, I started asking questions of residents as to whether they could tell the turbines were operating from inside their house. And at times they could, and at times they couldn't, because I started to get the concept that there was a feeling or a perception. And as a result of that, using narrowband measurements, I found that there were threshold levels in the order of 4 and 5 hertz at around 50 dB, where above that they were able to perceive it, and below that they weren't.
And Stephen, I know reading your report also, you actually found that and you did 3 properties, is that correct?
Yes, this brief was very specific. Yeah. It was to do 3 properties only and to investigate and determine specific wind conditions and specific noise levels in relation to the complaints lodged by the residents.
Okay,
so
and you even went into
different concept.
You even went into their houses and identified what you call hotspots within maybe even within a certain room, where
yes, I had hotspots inside and hotspots outside the houses, and it was more the hotspots outside the houses which were the areas that were actually in many cases subject to reflections of the sound, so there was a build-up adjacent to the house.
Okay. You then went on to do this work in southwest Victoria with the full cooperation of the wind company, and they actually shut down their turbines for extended periods of time.
Yes, they were doing work on the high voltage lines in the substation for the introduction of another stage of a wind farm in the area, and so they needed to shut down all their wind farms in the area over a number of days. So we pushed to get the survey to include that because it was very valuable information to get the ambient noise on and off with the turbines operating and not operating.
Stephen, looking at sort of burrowing down a little bit into your report yesterday, in this Victorian study, you even got people, and this wasn't sort of almost a scientific part of it, but you'd been told that people said they experienced the dizziness or the sensation from wind farms more so sometimes when they were bending over, maybe to open a gate or so on. So you actually got people lying on the ground, you got people bending over and so on, which is, well, it sounds very unconventional.
All that happened was that I observed one of the residents in the survey, after he was bending down to open a gate, he was actually quite unsteady. And so I asked some questions and I got him to carry out the exercise, because one of the issues that has been suggested overseas is that part of it is to do with the balance mechanism of the body. Now, whilst I'm not a doctor and not qualified in that area, I came up with an exercise and asked them to try it, of which they reported their experiences in the report.
But did you also find people were having these sensations even when the turbines weren't on?
They were having a few sensations, both in terms of vibration and sensation. And
yeah, but if they're having those sensations, even occasionally, when the turbines aren't even on, does that suggest it's got nothing to do with the turbines?
No, in actual fact, it led us to go and investigate further, and we found that under wind gust conditions, the turbines were shaking and exciting resonant modes, and we were able to measure vibration in the tower, vibration in the ground, near the turbines and out at residence, and we could also see in the noise spectrum following wind gusts, we could see these resonant peaks which are at frequencies not related to the operation of the turbine.
Okay. Now, we're talking to Stephen Cooper. He's currently in Canada but has done this study in Victoria, and it began in South Australia. He's with a company called Acoustic Group. He's an acoustic engineer looking at the impact of wind farms on residents.